Welcome to the Living Superhuman Fitness Podcast, where we take you inside our gym, CrossFit Palm Beach, each week. It's here that we are creating new superhumans every day, transforming people's lives, helping them reach a level of health they never knew possible. We strive to answer your most burning questions on fitness, health, nutrition, training, motivation, mindset, lifestyle, and more. If you have a question, please email us at info@crossfitpalmbeach.com. You can also learn more on our blog, livingsuperhuman.com. And if you have a moment, we'd love a review from you on iTunes. All right, it's time. Let's stop being average and start living superhuman. Hey guys, welcome to the Living Superhuman Fitness Podcast. My name is Andrew, and I'm joined today by
Tony
and Whitney Stevenson. We're not all related.
Tony's and Andrew are like Madonna, and we only have first names. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the 5-tool competitive CrossFitter. This is a concept that we were introduced by Ben Bergeron, who's the coach of the fittest man and woman on earth. We just went through his competitors training athlete camp about a month and a half ago, and this was one of the topics of discussion. So we want to share this with you guys today. We feel like it's really valuable. We're recording this, we're still in the open, but by the time you guys listen to this, we will probably be done with the open, and a lot of you will be thinking about next year and how can you do better for next year's open. So this is a really cool framework for thinking about yourself as an athlete and where you need to get better. A lot of times, we look at like the open and we say, oh, we did bad on that workout. The deadlift felt heavy, so I got to do more deadlifting as it relates to next year. But this is going to give you a more broader framework of where you can get better as an athlete, and hopefully this will guide your training over the next 10 to 11 months as we get ready for next year's open. So the 5-tool competitive CrossFitter, this is a concept that we believe was stolen from baseball, because Tony and I were both baseball players, and this is a concept that they use to scout baseball players. All the professional scouts are familiar with the 5 tools of a baseball player. If you know baseball, the 5 tools are hitting for power, hitting for average, fielding ability, throwing ability or arm strength, and speed. So when they look at a prospect, they're generally looking for where do those tools rank, not did that person help their team win a championship, or did that person, did they have a good season that year? They're looking at these raw tools and saying, can we develop this person into a baseball player? So these are kind of the raw building blocks of what makes a good baseball player, and in turn, what makes a good CrossFit athlete. And we were talking before the show, we'll get to the 5 tools of a CrossFitter very soon. We were talking about how in baseball, you can kind of hide behind not having certain tools. So if you want to talk about that, Tony, where you kind of saw that.
Yeah, I mean, baseball has positions that are based around, just hitting, like a DH, designated hitter, or just pitching. Pitchers aren't expected to really be good at hitting. They're not really expected to be fast either. So you can hide behind certain tools in baseball, and really the 5-tool player in baseball is rare. So that's a big difference between CrossFit and baseball. Is when we're talking about the 5 tools today, it's almost mandatory to have every single tool to be at the top of your game. In baseball, you can just have one great tool and be in the majors.
Yeah, that's really, really cool concept. I think it goes back to what Greg Glassman always says, which is like you're only as strong as your weakest link, and that's really true as it relates to the tools of a competitive CrossFitter, even though it may not apply to a baseball player. Although scouts love their 5-tool players if they can find them.
Yeah,
so
it's really apparent in the open, right? I mean, the open is designed to bring out your weaknesses and show you your weaknesses. Whereas as you get to a higher level, you get to the regionals and you get to the games, you can play off your strengths a little bit more, and a first place in a given event is going to help you a lot more. Where in the open, you're really just trying not to fall down the leaderboard, rather than make it to the top.
Yeah, definitely. I think for those athletes that are trying to make it to regionals and kind of get beyond just competing in the open, like you can't have one workout that's bad. Like even like your weakest workout, you need to be scoring in the top 40 in your region to stay competitive to make it to regionals. Even if you've been in the top 10 in the first 2 workouts, you can't have a workout where you're out of that top 40 range. So it definitely shows and exposes your weakness, and you basically can't have it. Like once you're trying to get to that next level, it's like you no longer can have a weakness. You have to be good at everything.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw it. We had Jeff Evans here doing samples a couple weeks back, and I've just been following him a little bit. And I think he put up one of the best top 5 or top 10 scores in the world on the snatch workout, chest to bar and snatch for the open. But the first 2 workouts were more conditioning biased, and he still did great. He still beat 99% of our gym and 99% of the great athletes out there. But those scores currently have him sitting outside of a place for regionals, which he's definitely that type of an athlete, maybe even a games level athlete. But because those tools are kind of lacking in CrossFit, he can't simply make up for them with being exceptional in that one area. So let's go through the 5 tools. So again, these are from Ben Bergeron. He kind of starts with the 3-headed monster. So he puts 3 tools a little bit above the other 2. The 3-headed monster is strength, skills, and conditioning. Those are your first 3 tools. The 4th and 5th tools are flexibility and mental toughness. Okay, so that's the 5 tools of what makes up a CrossFit athlete. So we're going to go through each one, talk about what kind of makes up each area, talk a little bit how to develop them, and which ones we feel are the most important, which ones take the longest to develop. So we'll start with strength. What are the things that you guys see making up strength in a CrossFit setting?
Well, that's basically your lifts. Where are your lifts at? I think Ben actually said, if he has an athlete that wants to make it to regionals, he knows what they have to hit in certain lifts. Like you have to have so much in your snatch, on your clean and jerk to get to the regionals.
I think he said it was like 250 snatch for a guy, maybe was it maybe 175, 180 for women.
I remember
clean and jerk was, I think 330. Yeah, I think that was for regionals as well. So it was like 330 clean and jerk and about 225, I think, on the female side. And then the games, it goes up a little bit more to be that games level athlete. But those are kind of the minimum numbers he looks for in his athletes. But obviously, he's looking at a different level athlete. Most of the athletes that we're looking at want to excel in the open. So other things that we see with strength, Olympic lifting is a big one. There's almost always a bias towards Olympic lifting in CrossFit competitions, especially the open and the regionals. Like we've already seen a dumbbell snatch, which not really a true Olympic lift, but it is a variation of it. So you had a dumbbell snatch already, you had a squat snatch, you had dumbbell power cleans. So we'll probably see one more thing that relates to Olympic lifting, and that's out of only 5 workouts.
Yeah, I think that just speaking to Olympic lifting, it's a kind of lifting where it's not just raw power. You're just going and picking up a 500-pound barbell. You have to have some technique involved in order to get past a certain level. You can't just be, you can't just be like a power lifter and come in and excel at Olympic lifting. You have to kind of shift your mindset a little bit so you can get that technique down to be able to sustain, like we saw in the snatch, toes to bar, and what was that? Bar muscle up workout? That was what we just did in the open?
We just did snatch and chest to bar.
Oh, snatch and chest to bar.
This workout, this open.
That's right. They all are blending together right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you had to have technique in order to keep moving forward in that workout. So not only just having raw power, but being able to dial in that technique is going to help you excel in some Olympic lifting.
For sure. Yeah, and there's some overlap in the tools as well, because you're kind of mentioning technique, and maybe that relates a little bit to skill. But Olympic lifting is definitely different than pure absolute strength. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have a lot of people in our gym that, from an absolute strength perspective, I think, like you said, the powerlifting, you think about movements like bench press, deadlifts, back squats. Those are things where, yes, technique is important, but far less than a clean or a snatch. So that absolute strength is a good test to say, okay, what is my absolute strength in these lifts versus what can I Olympic lift? So I can deadlift 500 pounds, but I have trouble squat snatching 95. Yeah. Where is the hole in here? Is it flexibility? Is it I need more technique work? Or is it just, I need to do more strength, speed stuff as it relates to like an Olympic lifting?
Yeah, and I think they all kind of like play into each other. It's definitely great to have that raw power, I think, or any kind of like explosive strength, but also being able to know how much you have to dial that back in order to gain technique or gain mobility. So it's sort of that game of like, okay, this is what I'm good at. I'm good at raw, powerlifting, but how can I kind of shift that over to make my Olympic lifts a little bit better, and kind of going back and forth there.
Well, in the open workout with the snatches and the chest to bar, it's fresh on everyone's mind, so they can remember like, where did it start to get hard for you? Like, did it get hard in the first set for guys 95 or 135? I know a lot of people got to the 135 and like, that felt heavy. And that's where I go to like, that was skill. That wasn't your strength just yet. If you don't have the skill down at 135, a moderate weight, it's gonna feel heavy. It's all technique there. And
that will vary from athlete to athlete. Like if your max is 145, then it might be a strength issue. But if you're more in that 185 or more, then it definitely is probably not a strength thing. So yeah, and then I think an easy way to think of it is break down each of your points of failure. When you do like cleans and you go for a heavy day or 1 rep max, do you get stuck coming out of that squat? It might be like an absolute strength issue where your front squat's just not strong enough. Your back squat's just not strong enough. You need to work on that absolute strength. It's not a technique thing of like your elbows being too low or something like that, or you just don't have enough time under tension there. So I also think there's different elements of strength that maybe people overlook, like muscular endurance. So it's not just about what you can do once, it's about what can you do 50 times, or strength to body weight ratio usually plays in terms of like the ability to get a muscle up, is many times a strength issue, not necessarily a technique issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think we just did that. We just did the open workout where you had to do 55 moderately heavy deadlifts. And you saw some people that busted through them and then went onto the wall balls like nothing happened. And then you saw some people like struggling, and maybe 1 rep they wouldn't struggle with at 155 or 225 or whatever weight they were doing, but 55 of them became soul crushing. So that's where they have the strength to do it once, but do they have the muscular endurance to continue to repeat that 55 times and then move on and do something else, where that kind of like separates the boys from the men, or the men or the girls from the ladies or something.
All right, so next piece is the skills. In the same way that Ben talked about, he looks for an athlete that has a 250 snatch and 300-pound clean and jerk, he kind of has these benchmarks as it relates to certain skills. Some of the key ones that come to mind for me are like things like double unders is a big skill, handstand push-ups, muscle-ups, pistols. Those are some of the big skills. I definitely think, kind of as Whitney alluded to, is that Olympic lifting has a big skill piece to it, even though people see it as a strength lift. So I think you don't want to overlook the skill aspect, the skill development of your barbell movements, because that's certainly important. But definitely skills like the body weight things we're mentioning need a lot of practice time. They need a lot of detail-oriented practice, deep practice where you're focusing on the little things that make that thing better.
Yeah, I see this so much with, members or people I've worked with, and skills is not like you're born with it or you're not. Like some people think that, and I think it's more of that. In the past we've talked about like an open or closed mindset. Like that's what's basically keeping you from getting that skill. If you continue to tell yourself every day, I'm never going to get double unders, I don't have double unders, and you quit in the middle of every single time you try to practice them, you probably won't get double unders, but not because you can't acquire the skill, but because you're literally stopping yourself from getting it. And I think the same thing goes for so much in CrossFit. Like I've seen, people teach a grown man who's never done gymnastics how to do a muscle up. So I feel like anyone can do a muscle up. And it's more in the mind that kind of stops us from getting there. And there's things that we might be slower at learning, but if you take the time to break it down to where you can learn it, I think that's like the discipline and the practice that you need to have to kind of like move through and learn the skills.
Yeah, I think as CrossFitters, we're almost like spoiled in a lot of ways because we start doing CrossFit and we see our numbers go up so fast. We improve so fast that we almost take for granted that like practice time that is so common in other sports. You know, we've talked about baseball, but like, so let's go back to that. So many baseball players will hit buckets and buckets of balls off a tee, you know? They'll do throwing drills and they'll break things down, and that's so common in this other sport. But we see with a lot of our athletes, it's very rare to see them spend, 20 minutes 3 times a week on double unders when they don't have them. They just kind of assume that that it's something that you have or you don't, when it's something that can certainly be developed.
And it's all in efficiency and movement. The better you move at something, the less energy you're going to try to use to do that movement, and like a big one for me is like double unders. Like I see a lot of people, and I used to do it myself, you do double unders, you come off a set of 30 to 50, and I used to be like winded. And now it's like, that's where I regain my breath, my cardio, because I know how to do them in an efficient manner to where I get better in the workout by doing double unders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That can go for handstand push-ups, as we saw in this past open workout, muscle ups. The more efficient you are, the less energy expenditure that you can save for other things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people look at this skill and they see the whole skill. They see a ring muscle up. They see doing double unders. They see a handstand push-up. And yeah, that's the skill, but you can break it down to the smaller things. Like that's where, really to be great at ring muscle ups, I had to figure out how to do a hollow hold on the ground. And then continue to work from hollow holds to just doing basic ring rows, trying to keep a good body position, and then the transfer, and then doing dips, and then maybe trying them on the rings with a band. So you kind of have to have that big picture of all right, that's my goal, but then break it down to those little pieces of, all right, where do I start? I know Ben went over something with us when we were at the camp that Katrin was struggling with muscle ups too, and they worked for 6 months without doing ring muscle ups in a Metcon so she could develop her skill better, and then they applied it into a Metcon where it was under some intensity, under some fatigue, to see how she would handle it, versus every day trying to do that under fatigue, under intensity, and never really developing the skill to move forward.
Yeah. We try to include progressions when we do skill work, or maybe even warm-ups. Sometimes we try to include these progressions, and it's really key to break stuff down, like you said, and low heart rate is key. Keep that heart rate down when you're doing skill work, because that's going to allow you to really maximize the movement quality of what you're doing. So the third part of that 3-headed monster that starts the 5 tools is conditioning. So conditioning is what most of us think of with CrossFit. We think of the Metcons, okay? And there's a lot of elements that come with conditioning. I kind of break it down as 2 key areas, which is your lactic threshold and your aerobic threshold is kind of the 2 big ones. You can kind of think of an anaerobic athlete versus an aerobic athlete, if you are familiar with those terms. I know all of these terms might be a little bit foreign to you. But that lactic threshold is really that sustainable pace for about 10 to 20 minutes, which is the majority of what you see in a CrossFit setting. The aerobic threshold is typically what you see more in a marathon runner or a triathlete who's got to go for hours at a time. But that aerobic threshold underlies even your 5-minute work, your 10-minute work as well. If you have that aerobic base, it kind of is your foundation that you layer on that lactic threshold on top of it, that power output on top of it. So you can stay in a nice zone with that aerobic threshold and then increase your power, increase your speed via that lactic threshold.
So can't we just work on it a month away from the open, right? We can forget about it for 10 months and then get it back?
No. No.
That's the swimmer.
I'm fortunate that was my background swimming, so every day I was training in both of those, mainly an aerobic threshold, but also I did sprinting, so we worked with lactic threshold and also lactic tolerance as well, which is basically the difference between lactic threshold and tolerance is when you're doing something lactic tolerance, you're going all out super hard. So I would do basically like a mock race. So 100 meters all out, and I would do that 8 times with like a minute rest in between each one. So I was generating lactic acid in my body, sitting with it, and then trying to perform again, seeing how well my body would perform under that lactic tolerance. The threshold is more where we want to be to gain fitness, to be as fit as we can, because we're kind of riding that line. We're not quite generating a ton of lactic acid in our body, maybe a little bit, but we're kind of able to just sustain the whole time, and it goes for a long period of time. And then your aerobic threshold, that would just be when I was swimming, like our whole practice, like warm up to warm down, just constantly moving, getting warm, staying sweaty, even though I never felt like I was sweating. I was in the water, but it's something that for me, I'm lucky to have that as my background, because it's not a sexy thing to do. It's not a sexy thing to practice, and it's really good to have that as your background, because it's sort of like, for me, I just kind of go back to what I know. But for a lot of people, that's not what they know. They know a team sport. They know where they were giving out effort, being explosive and dynamic, and then resting. So it's a constant effort for people who don't know about it really, or who don't have that background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tony brought up a good point of like, can we just train it like 6 weeks away before the Open? And the answer is definitely not. I think Coach Zach, who's not here right now, is a great example of this. He and his coach sort of pinpointed that his engine, his conditioning of these 5 tools was the weakest. And he did a lot of stuff throughout the year, 30 to 75 minutes in length. I mean, he does a lot of 60-minute bike sessions, 60-minute row sessions. And a lot of people will say, well, how does this make you better at a 10, 12-minute workout? And we're seeing how it's made Zach better over the course of a year, because he's developed this aerobic system. So it definitely does take time to develop. Strength takes time to develop as well. But part of that is just assessing where you're weak at as an athlete. Let's go on to the 4th and 5th tools. So we have flexibility and mental toughness. Which ones do you guys want to start with?
Well, you mentioned that the strength, skills, and conditioning is kind of like the 3-headed monster. These aren't to be forgotten. I think these are just always there. You know, they're just kind of, they don't have their own section because they should be, apparent in all movements. You know, you have to have the mental toughness through all the 3-headed monster, and same with flexibility.
So yeah, with flexibility, there's a bunch of different elements. Tony brought it up as it relates to skills, but I think sometimes it's not that you haven't put enough reps into something, it's that you don't have the flexibility to move efficiently with something. So, pistols is a great example. If you're struggling, if you can't hold the bottom of your pistol position and hang out there, then it's going to be tough to do 50 pistols really well. Same with like a handstand push-up. If you can't get in a really great, strong, open handstand push-up, then the level of fatigue and efficiency is going to be so much different than someone who can do that, and 55 of them in a situation like an open workout is going to be nearly impossible, because you just don't have that flexibility and that positioning that someone else may have. So flexibility is definitely overlooked. It's not just the ability to do something once, but to do it efficiently 50 to 100 times.
Yeah, I think flexibility is so important. I mean, yeah, definitely in skills, but also in strength. Like if you don't have the flexibility to do a proper squat, like even though you might be able to put as much weight as you want on the bar, but you're not going to get better at squatting if you don't have the flexibility to do that. And thus you're not going to get stronger in any of your other lifts, because you're missing a huge link that what actually increases strength. Same thing with deadlifts. If you don't have the flexibility to pick the bar up off the ground properly in good deadlift form, again, you're going to miss out on developing that huge area of strength. But for me, I think mental toughness is the most important skill you can have and develop and hone over all of these, just to apply in your life in general. But definitely, if you want to become a great CrossFit athlete, I think that could possibly be the most overlooked and most important tool to have.
Yeah, I feel like that's the tool that compounds the other ones. Like if you have all 4 in place, that mental toughness piece could take you to being the best athlete in the world, or just an everyday person. I mean, it really could be that. There's a lot of people that we see in the gym that have a lot of the raw tools, but they may not have like the mental toughness piece to put it into full action. And the mental toughness thing is also something that you can work on all year, just like these things. It's not something that you can show up on game day and put into place. It's something that has to be developed over time and may take the longest to develop, honestly, of all these, because it takes so much specific work. What are some things that you feel like can be trained as it relates to mental toughness, or that you guys have been working on mental toughness wise since taking like the comp train camp?
One of the main things I've been working on is being mentally present, like being as present as I possibly can, not only like when I'm working out or training, but when I'm outside of the gym. I didn't realize that, like, you know, the least present I am is probably at home when I just want to like watch Real Housewives and like turn my brain off, and like that actually is not super, it doesn't make me a better person, and it doesn't help me be more present when the time is right, when I want to be present. It actually like takes away from that. So the more that I practice being present in my life, like in general, when the time comes, like on game day, my natural response is to be present, not to kind of want to distract myself or like listen to a song or get out of my head. I'll be in my head and I'll be like ready to attack what's right in front of me. So for me, just being present as much as I can, and like noticing when I'm not present, like where my brain is just kind of shutting off, and what am I doing? How am I getting affected by, just driving or doing whatever? Like, am I getting irritated and just changing the channel on the radio the whole time? Or am I like actually aware that like I'm driving, like I could potentially get in an accident if I don't pay attention right now? So for me, that's been the main thing I'm just working on right now.
Yeah.
You train your mental muscles all the time.
Yeah.
Because if you take a break, then, they're getting weaker. And I think that was something I learned, was like talking to Katrin about, all the things she's accomplished, and realizing that, like, you think she's just like this fortress inside her head. Like nothing ever goes wrong up there. And apparently, they have their weaknesses too. Like They have the bad thoughts in their head. And that was really cool to hear, because like everyone has those thoughts. It's just how you deal with them.
Yeah.
So like that's really stuck with me, is like dealing with those thoughts, kind of admitting to myself that that's normal, letting them pass through, and then bringing the good thoughts in.
Yeah.
That's been a big switch for me.
And I think, one way to practice that is meditation. We've all kind of dabbled in it a little bit, but Headspace is such an easy way to try it out. It's a great way to think about your breathing a little bit more, which is super important in a CrossFit workout. Your breath, keeping your heart rate down, things like that. But that presence of being able to have a thought, whether it be positive or negative, and not get completely latched onto that thought where it affects your life or affects your workout in a negative way. Because there's always going to be a point in every single workout where a negative thought creeps in. It happens to the best athletes in the world, and your ability to just ignore that or to use it as fuel is what's going to make you a better athlete. It's going to make your experience so much more enjoyable in those workouts. You won't feel like you're like forcing things. You feel like you can actually enjoy it and push because you feel good. Another piece of the mental toughness that I liked was being okay with giving your best effort. That was a big thing. Is we redo a lot of workouts in CrossFit. We're in a week right now where we're redoing an open workout from last year. Some people are going to do better. Hopefully a lot of people will do better. Some people aren't going to do as good. Right now, I didn't do as good as my first attempt. I'm actually really happy, though. I was 8 reps away, and I'm satisfied with my performance. I'm still going to redo it to try to beat it, but I'm satisfied with the effort that I put in. And I don't know if I would have that same satisfaction before doing the comp train camp, because I do know I gave my best. I know I've been training hard throughout the year, and I still think I can do better, but even if I don't, I'm happy with the way things have gone so far.
Yeah, I think one of the things I got to know about myself is that I do get very affected by like the leaderboard and who's who, and I'm the first person to compare myself to somebody else when I get the chance. So I've taken I made it a goal this year to just not look at the leaderboard for the open at all, just enter my score, and it is what it is, and be happy with it. And it's made a huge difference for me, just not even seeing names, not seeing anything, just kind of like knowing like I gave my very best and like put my score in, and whatever happens will happen. I'm sure I'll eventually look at it, but yeah, I wish I was somebody who could look at the leaderboard and not get affected by it, but I know myself, and I know that like as soon as I see a name or a number next to my name. I just start comparing, and I start basically diminishing the work that I did and not being proud of what I did and not being happy with it. And I think innately I know that I want to be proud and happy of what I've done. And like, yeah, I'll probably never be satisfied. That's just like the nature of the athlete I am. But just being able to be like mentally okay with all of my effort and being proud of myself and knowing like that's my best ever. I did the best I could that day and put the score in. It's just made a huge difference. I think that has made me mentally stronger than looking at the leaderboard and comparing myself and attempting workouts, 6 or 7 times. I think doing the workout twice, just doing my best, putting my score in has actually like improved my mental toughness more than any of the years I've done previously.
Definitely. And that's something that all of our members can put into practice every day, is put a little less stake in the whiteboard and think about those skill elements of mental toughness rather than just like, did I place in the top 3 in the class or whatever it is.
I think you learn so much more by being able to do that and have like those little moments of reflection. Like when we did the camp, Ben had us take the first like 30 seconds after some of the harder workouts that we did, and he was saying to us out loud, like, what are you saying to yourself right now? What are you thinking? Are you proud of something you did? Did you do something that you're proud of in the workout? And like, wow, like, yeah, I did. I did my first handstand push-up, or I did 15 handstand push-ups unbroken, or whatever it was. You could kind of go back and reflect, and like that's where you really learn about yourself, and like you learn not only the good things that you've done, but you kind of like nurture that, and then that becomes your thought the next time you do a workout. Like, oh, I'm going to be super proud when I get this, or I'm going to be so excited when I finish and can think about the great thing that I accomplished there. So yeah, I loved that. That was awesome.
Yeah, and maybe if it's not even a great thing, maybe it's like you get into handstand push-ups that day and you're like, my shoulders were fried, but like maybe your good thing was I stuck with it. Even though I didn't feel my best today, I stuck with it, and I never mentally bowed out of the workout,
That's how I've been gauging like all my workouts from basically since comp train, like, did I do well today? It was all about my positive self-talk. What did I speak positively to myself? Did I let the negative thoughts go by? And that's how I gauged that workout, And it wasn't the score on the board. It wasn't in comparison to anyone else. It was just, did I speak well to myself and lift myself up in that workout?
Cool. So as we have these 5 tools and we start looking at like next year, the years to come as a whole, it's really important that we do a true like honest overall assessment. We don't get caught up in like, we were talking before the show how like with something like the snatch workout, it can be a very concrete thing to say you're not strong enough. It can, because you got to the 225 bar and you couldn't lift it. You got to, for the ladies, you couldn't do RX at all because you couldn't squat snatch 65 pounds once. It's easy to point to that one thing, but look at all 5 workouts, look at all of your daily workouts as a whole, and really assess where is the breaking point. Where do you start to have these big periods of rest, or where do you have to slow down? Is it more conditioning? Is it more skill related? Is it more strength related? And do an honest assessment, figure out where your real true weakness is, and start to put a little bit more dedication into that area. One of the things that we're gonna just touch on really quick is what is the most important tool, what is the most important tool for CrossFit? Of the 5 tools, we talked about mental toughness possibly being the most important. Of the other 4, which ones do you guys feel is the most important if we kind of separate that one out for now?
I think it's a mix between skill and strength. It's efficiency and movement, and it's moving weight fast. It's work capacity, and maybe that's just because it's top of mind because the open and the open test work capacity. But if you want to be good at the open, which a lot of people do, and they want to get better for next year's, it's moving weight well.
I'm going to disagree, and I'm biased towards this one, but I truly do believe that conditioning is the most important. Not because I do believe that people can become conditioned and learn how to condition themselves and improve that skill, even if they're coming in as like a strength biased athlete, but the discipline it takes to do that is like unheard of. It's not very common. You don't commonly see people wanting to sit on an assault bike for an hour 5 days a week, or go on runs and do interval training. And I think that the discipline that it takes to learn conditioning and know yourself and learn about yourself through conditioning is something that it's not sexy. You're not able to post about it on Instagram. It's not like the fun stuff for most people. I kind of think it's fun, but for most people, they don't think it's fun. So I think because of the difficulty it takes to learn and like apply that would make it like the most important skill. Because the people that are doing it, it's separating them like the cream from the crop. Whereas strength, it takes the most time to develop, but it's kind of fun. You kind of can get a little like ego stroke out of it. You can post on Instagram and show your max lifts, and the improvement through strength is a lot more tangible than through conditioning. So I think that just because that, I don't know, the difference there, I think conditioning is the most important tool.
I definitely agree with Whitney, and I like what you said about how the conditioning can kind of fuel the mental toughness side, as well as that being an important piece as well. As someone who has close to all the strength and all the skills and then gets regularly beat by people who are out-conditioned on me, I would say conditioning is the most important, especially as it relates to the open. I think it's primarily a conditioning test, and I would work to get your strength and skills up to a minimum level, but know that those are only going to get you so far until the conditioning is up to an exceptional level. And I think that's really the key, is the strength and skills have to be at a minimum, but the conditioning can always get better, and it will always help you in a big way if you can get it better.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. And then with strength, I think that takes the longest time to develop. So if you're someone who is super deficient in that area, you need to dedicate yourself on pretty much a year-round basis, and really the only time that you want to kind of back off of that is maybe the 2 to 3 weeks before the open and during the open. Besides that, strength is kind of a year-long progression for you. And I think that's really what Tony is saying is that, that's a place you got to put your time and energy.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think that's it. We'll kind of wrap it up there. Anything else to add? Nope.
2018, here we come.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Until next year.